Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And thank you, Perry Ann, for that great introduction. As she said, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of the Chamber, and I'm also a former journalist myself. So I'm super excited about our panel today. We've got 4 of the top journalists in the financial industry joining us to talk about how they cover blockchain, digital currencies, and the tremendous innovations that we are witnessing in our industry as things explode, as we've been talking about all morning. So joining us today, let's just jump right into the panel, are Mark DeCambre, who is the markets editor at Dow Jones and MarketWatch, Michael Del Castillo, who is the associate editor at Forbes and is a prolific writer on our industry, and Michael Casey, who is the chief content officer at CoinDesk, recently launched CoinDesk TV. If you haven't checked it out, check that out. We love it. We've all been watching it here. And last but not least, who is not joining us live today is Angie Lau. She's not here because she's sound asleep in Hong Kong, but she very kindly, we asked her if she would please, as the editor and CEO of Forkast.News, and as a former Bloomberg Asia anchor, if she would share some of her thoughts to kick us off here on how journalists and the media are covering our industry in Asia. So let's have a listen. If you can roll the tape, we'll take a look at what Angie has to say.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. And I want to thank as well Digital Chamber of Commerce for asking me to join you all for Parallel this month. And while I would have loved to have joined you all live, it is in the middle of the night for us here in Asia. So here's a quick hit in a pre-record instead. So it is great to be here. I'm Angie Lau, editor-in-chief of Forkast.News, a digital media platform that covers very specifically blockchain, crypto, and digital assets and emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy from Asia to the world. And it is from this unique perspective that I share an update with you from our vantage point right here in Asia. First, some insights on how blockchain and digital currencies are being covered in the mainstream and business media in this region. So increasingly, I'd like to share that the coverage reflects something we've been monitoring since day one at Forkast. And this is the rise of China and its role in blockchain innovation. Coverage in the mainland, and I'm talking about domestic media, often state-run and state-owned media in China, understandably more exuberant and at the same time conservative in tone, since this is a PBOC government-led initiative. Now contrast that to coverage by foreign media outside the country, outside China, and in this region. And I do note that it's starting to take a more apprehensive tone, asking where's the balance from other nations, notably a recent column by an ex-colleague of mine at Bloomberg, Neil Ferguson, who shared this: "Don't let China mint the money of the future," outlining that, first, a central bank in the modern fiat monetary system can influence money supply. We all know that. But also noting that something that I think has been part of our conversation for a while now, both at the Digital Chamber of Commerce level, at the regulatory level, and the international level, and also what we're covering here, that China has been thinking a lot more creatively than its American or European counterparts. I want to share with you, indeed, that's something that we're reporting on in an upcoming exclusive series that we're working on at Forkast, with the support of a grant from a mainstream institution, Judith Neilson Media Institute in Australia, that has tasked us to report on this story more widely. And so we're going to be reporting on China's increasing influence in blockchain technology and potentially shift geopolitical power dynamics as well. We believe there needs to be a continued push on educating everyone in this space, not only on policy, but also other media and peers. So when it comes to educating the mainstream media, while the majority of headlines does still remain fixed on Bitcoin prices coming up or down or the latest scams, there's also increasingly more thoughtful coverage. It's still not quite as deep as what we're covering from a more blockchain-centric perspective and blockchain niche, including blockchain services network being built out of China. This is still not a widely covered nor even known by mainstream audience, including senior executives and C-suites at multinationals across the Asia Pacific, and we know this anecdotally. While of course we all believe that it's important for the media to understand more about the opportunities in this space beyond Bitcoin prices, it also predominantly depends on editorial vision and direction, really. I was asked to speak on this specifically from the Digital Chamber of Commerce. And on this, I'm going to have to be more critical of the general state of media coverage in blockchain and cryptocurrency. Unless there is real dedication of resources and the desire to have reporters in newsrooms develop this beat more thoughtfully and really take the time to develop and craft a subject matter authority on this kind of coverage will rest on those of us who have dedicated our niche focus on this industry. What is good is that our peers actually read us, and from that education and broader narrative can flow and inspire, we hope, reporters to pitch to editors on the rising influence of this industry. So I hope this was helpful. It will take continued communications, working your media connections, and sharing developments as much as possible. You're doing important work. I share it, and I thank you for it. So have a great rest of the session. We hope to be a continued resource to you at Forkast.News, and that's www.forkast.news. Until the next time.
So that's a great place to pick up. I'm going to just let Angie give us the lead here and ask each of you guys to really respond to some of what she said, which one of the things that really interested me is she's talking about educating fellow journalists who really are still, in many cases, at the earliest stages of understanding our industry. And interestingly, this is exactly what our congressman spoke about in the first segment, was that they're still trying to do that with their colleagues. So can each of you kind of chime in here a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of your industry and your editors and your reporters, fellow journalists, how they are covering the industry and how they're not covering the industry? I'll start with you, Mark DeCambre.
Thanks for having me, and great to be here with the Michaels. Yeah, it's a fascinating time, right? Because we're really at the doorstep of a new industry and a new way of thinking about money and assets, really. So it's there's been a lot of struggles, I think, I'm sure, inside newsrooms as to how much time and space to allocate to digital currencies and digital assets and crypto and even the nomenclature, right? Should crypto be, capitalized, or should it be singular? So there's all these questions about how to approach the industry, capital Bitcoin or lowercase. But at the end of the day, it seems like a fundamental shift into something that we really need to get a hold of and get our arms around. So it's really sort of a good start to our conversation about kind of where innovation is going to come. And I think one of the things we need to do is kind of shift away from just focusing on prices, the daily moves of Bitcoin, and into what fundamentally is happening beneath the surface. And certainly there's a lot going on. So that's one of the things I think we're trying to focus on more.
I'll chime in there. In response specifically to your comment about education and how our industry is dealing with education, I'm happy to report in one sense that I think we're dealing with it well. One of the nice things about Forbes is that it's very horizontal. We have beats that cover pretty much everything in the world. And since I joined there just about 3 years ago, I've seen an increase in inbound requests from my colleagues across the board. People who write about healthcare asking me about blockchain, people who write about the music industry asking me about blockchain, people who write about all wide variety of aspects in all areas around the world coming to me asking questions about cryptocurrency and blockchain. So to a large degree, I think that education is happening organically as the tendrils of crypto expand out further and further into mainstream, as institutions get involved, as big enterprises get involved. There's a self-education that's happening in our non-crypto peers. But there's another educational aspect where I think deserves a little bit more attention, which is those who are covering it full time. I'll be totally honest, I mean, we're frequently dabblers at the very beginning. I have a degree in English literature, and the closest education I ever got to cryptography was studying metaphysical poetry and how to, understand the different layers of meaning. And I had to learn in the trenches from peers, from brilliant colleagues that had been around a lot longer than I did. But to wrap up this comment on education, I think that is formalizing to a degree. And I have to take the opportunity to plug just a little bit here. Myself and peers at Wall Street Journal and CoinDesk and elsewhere are founding a nonprofit called the Association for Cryptocurrency Journalists and Researchers, ACJR, which is specifically aimed at sort of like helping new reporters sort of come up the learning curve faster. So some of the education is happening organically, and it's really cool to see it happening in beats outside of blockchain and crypto, but we still have a lot to teach ourselves. And I think we can do that by leveraging those who've been around longer and those who know other areas.
So I'll add to this. I'll just say I'm the one person Michael's been from a crypto-specific institution, CoinDesk, and now is at a more mainstream, but as he says, it's horizontal structure. I did the opposite move. I was at the Wall Street Journal for many years, and now I'm at CoinDesk. And so that's given me a different perspective. I mean, I felt like, I had Paul Vigna, my co-author, former colleague at the Journal, on my podcast yesterday, and we were reminiscing about the days back in 2013 when the only things it seemed like our editors wanted us to cover was who is Satoshi, and it was just mad because we wanted to write about all these other things. It was like, no, find him. And he says they still kind of a bit obsessed with that, but of course they are getting more sophisticated in the knowledge and the questions and so forth. On the CoinDesk side, it's actually the opposite. I find that what's happening now, as particularly the Coinbase listing yesterday, where we are deficient, and this is just, our own dirty laundry being aired here, is we need more capability to understand traditional financial markets, to understand, to better read a corporate balance sheet, for example, and sort of grapple with this worlds that are now coming together. So there is actually learning on both sides that needs to happen. And I think what's interesting is there's people like myself and Michael and Mark, who's done a lot of coverage of this, who are straddling these worlds now and bringing them together. I think that's really interesting. I'm going to give an anecdote there, though, or at least a story. And this is not to slam the New York Times, but I need to say it because it's been bugging me since last night. There's still so much learning that has to go. There was a story in the Times, I'm not going to name the journalist, yesterday, talking about the energy problem of Bitcoin. And it had at the very end of it a line that was just absolutely unsustainable. And it said that proof of stake is going to solve this. Ethereum is expected to move to proof of stake, and so is Bitcoin. And it says expected to. There was no attribution to anybody. It was just like the final line in this. And like anybody understands how Bitcoin works. I suppose there is a very, very slim possibility that might happen, but there's no way you could write a blanket statement like that, right? So there's still a lot of learning that needs to happen. That obviously got through editors. How people understand how this network works and why that is an almost impossible thing to happen. That is the core problem. They don't actually understand the functionality of a decentralized network, the nature of Bitcoin, and how all the forces in the world are working against that actually happening. And so, there's still a huge learning curve for many journalists to go through.
And to riff on that, Michael, I'd say the fact-checking process is only as good as the fact checkers, right?
Right.
And obviously, the New York Times is, well respected for its fact-checking processes, but if you don't have informed fact checkers, there's only so much that you can do there. I do think that the fact checking as a concept is something that the industry still has a long way to go on. And trade publications and mainstream publications alike would be well served by taking a breath and doing a little bit more fact checking as we go forward. That's just a great case in point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example, and maybe Mark, you can start to chime in on this too. I know we talked a little bit before our panel today, the three of us, about this obsession with price. And as somebody myself who was a journalist, I understand that there is a migration in the beginning of disruptive technology movements toward the easiest thing to explain. And price is obviously very easy to explain. It goes up, it goes down. And one of the things that we're noticing at the Chamber in our interaction with journalists is that increasingly you have mainstream television journalists and certainly some of the other larger media outlets that are following writers like you guys and reporters like you guys, and also certainly things like CoinDesk, and they're starting to learn more and more. But we are still stuck in this sort of driving narrative of what is today's Bitcoin price, and after yesterday, what is the price of Coinbase going to be today? So how do we kind of get beyond that and expand into a broader narrative? And also, I'm super interested to hear from you guys about what do you see as the future of investigative journalism in our industry?
So yeah, I think we should disabuse ourselves of the notion that we're gonna stop focusing on price. Price is we're capitalists, right? So that's in the follow the money chase is what journalists do all day long, which is also why folks would have Casey chasing up Satoshi or Satoshis or whomever. But yeah, I don't think that the fascination with the fluctuations around Bitcoin are going to change anytime soon. But I do think we need to expand into what's happening beneath the surface. And like I said at the top of this, kind of the notion of what is blockchain doing and what are the implications, right? A lot is at stake, it seems, because it feels like we're at an inflection point on a lot of different fronts. Part of it driven by this whole notion that we've got super low interest. We're in our second financial crisis, which happens to also be a public health crisis. So we're wrestling with those issues. And really, when you think about Bitcoin, it was born out of the first financial crisis. And so here we are in the second leg of a new one, expecting some point of normalization to happen. And all the while, it should be no surprise to anyone that folks are very fixated on global deficits growing, on inflation fears, and really that's kind of the backdrop to the emergence and certainly institutional adoption of Bitcoin. And that's part of the narrative that we're trying to push as well, because part of it is about Bitcoin and about crypto, but another part of it is about, again, like I said earlier, the evolution of money and these concepts and these thoughts about what it all means. Where will be the capital of money? Is the U.S. losing to some component its hegemony? Is dollar hegemony at stake? So there's just a lot of questions around that, and I think we're going to start to see more reporting around that as well. And just kind of to your point about when will we see more investigative journalism? There's a point at which you'd get like these emails from people, and you'd be like, "Who are these people? Why are they emailing me?" So I think as the industry has matured, you get to know who's real and who to follow, and I think that maturational process will also yield more investigations into Coinbase. Not that there's anything wrong there, but just like what's going on there, what's happening beneath the surface, and other industries too. Just looking at miners more in detail. So I think that's going to happen.
Jackie, I could build on something if you don't mind from what Mark said about we can't avoid the price, but then he talked about this broader macroeconomic stories that come out of it. I think part of the solution here is to be smart about how we weave the narrative between price and all of this, right? I mean, there's a strong argument to make that the first real proven use case of Bitcoin is actually speculation, but that's not a bad thing, because that is how you basically build the network effects. That's how you get all the excitement, the buzz, and then this is this whole waves of innovation theory, and then it ultimately builds, raises everything else, and we get there. So what we're really talking about is an economic system. And I think that's where the deficit of understanding is that people don't see how all these pieces come together. They see a rising price and speculation. They go, oh, that's a bubble. That's a tulip bubble. But they're not thinking hard about how it all feeds back into this network effect of, the FOMO effect of people now, going after the next Coinbase, and how that's going to flow more money into the crypto space. And that's going to lead to innovation here and there. And so I think it's not about ignoring one or the other. It's thinking hard about, this is truly a uniquely different economic system. And prices and markets are absolutely central, to Mark's point, to that. So how do we get sophisticated about that rather than dismissing things as a bubble or whatever, and trying to understand how this comes together? On the investigative piece, yes, we need this. We need that level of quality journalism to be brought to this. People are doing it, but there's much more to be done. I do feel like this is where the mainstream media has a lot more experience than, say, the CoinDesk of this world, but we are investing in this ourselves right now. We're expanding our long form coverage. We're looking to make sure, we think, for example, that having crypto journalists be very deliberate about focusing on awards. So here's a competition for you guys. Let's get out there and sort of battle over some Loeb awards or something, right? That becomes a structure. The Journal was always very good at this. It's like, okay, we're gonna get a Pulitzer this year, and they put all this energy into doing so, and out of it comes incredible reporting like John Carreyrou's work on Theranos, right? So having a very deliberate focus on how can we rise to that level with the big guys, right, and be part of the broader conversation, and then maybe there are awards to be had in this. I think that helps to feed the positive feedback loop of quality journalism and sort of deep-seated investigation, because it's absolutely needed. There's so much fraud and scammy stuff out there that there's a key role to play in exposing them for the sake of bringing integrity and trust to the system.
And
Yeah,
you can't do any exposing until you actually understand what's happening in the industry, understand the coding process, understand how the protocols work, understand the difference between a proof of work and a proof of stake, and what that means for various and sundry digital assets. That's kind of the key knowledge, and growth and maturation needs to happen on that level. And you need to get to there before you can break stories, which is, it's great that, we're building, journalistic clubs and affiliations around that, because that's what's lost.
And I'd chime in there. I think that investigative journalism is kind of like the institutional adoption of the media world. You don't start there, you kind of have to build to that. And picking up on a word that Michael said, we're investing in that. We're investing in investigation. Investigation is expensive. And the journalism business model, when Bitcoin came out, the journalism business model was broken. It was struggling, it was hurting. And then this new beat comes in to an already broken journalism model, and it had to survive. And how did it survive? It survived with the low-hanging fruit, which was price stories. And I think that price stories are still valuable. I think they will always be valuable. They will always be a reflection of more than just the value of that particular asset, but the value of the ideas underneath that asset, which permeate all blockchain, including permissionless blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. But as the journalism business model has slowly, if I'm to be a little optimistic, started to fix itself, and as the media, as the crypto media business model has started to mature, and we're seeing subscription models, and we're seeing television broadcasts, and we're seeing all kinds of other different ways to generate revenue, I think that we will start to see more expensive journalism. And it really is just a matter of connecting that dot from the price story that took 10 minutes to write and gets 1 million clicks versus the investigative journalism piece that took 10 weeks to write and gets 1,000 clicks. We have to connect those dots.
Part of it too, and Michael's, tell me if you disagree, is that this was viewed as a niche, a little small area of the market, and if that. Now Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley are looking at the quarterly results that Coinbase put out, and they're like, "Whoa, did you see those? Did you see those fees? I want a piece of that." Yeah. So that's the other. That's how adoption happens. That's like, to Michael's point, Casey's point. That's how network effects happen. People want a piece of that, and that's also going to generate more and different types of coverage, because that adoption by some of the traditional players in the industry also feeds into how you cover it and how we think about it, and how our editors come back to us about this industry.
And I want to just pop in real quick here. We've got just about a minute left, and we do have a question from somebody in the audience, which is relevant. Do you think we're going to see a 24-hour crypto-focused news channel, or will legacy television just discuss the industry more and more? That is an interesting question for sure.
Well, I think I should answer that, right?
Yeah.
It's called CoinDesk TV. So, it's not 24/7. That's true. Yes, but we are certainly you know, and it's digital first. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think any TV channel that launches now, out of anywhere, is going to be a traditional cable TV channel or a traditional network TV. It's going to be, you know, over the top digital first stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, we call it TV, and it's not actually a TV. TV is an outdated word, of course, but we're calling it TV. I don't know if we're running out of time. I just want to make one quick point, though, just to what Mark was saying. If it's okay, Jackie, and we're running
Sure, yeah.
It was just simply like, you know, he was talking about, you know, this, you know, how do you get people excited, and how does he stopping seeing it as a niche? I go into, you know, we're hiring aggressively, you know, so we're going to all the, you know, the CUNY, the Columbia, and the NYU job fairs and everything else. And I'm often the guy that comes in and says, and I tell them one thing, I say, this is the most exciting story in finance. Nothing like this has happened for 500 years, right? This is a change in the structure of our financial system that began with the Medici at the end of the 15th century. This is so big. So when people get that, then the students are coming at it. We're getting so much inbound because of the fact that people get it. So I love the idea that younger people who are seeing it, whose brains aren't sort of shaped by the sort of the old structure of the past, are able to get enthusiastic about it and see that this is a huge opportunity. It's not a niche at all. This is transformative. And there's a direct line from this to China's digital currency. They are part of the same beat, right? So, you know, it's a really big deal. And I think it's a good point, Mark, that we just got to get away from that, because it's a very narrow way of thinking.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like we could carry on and on. Mark, Michael, Mike, thank you guys so much. We'd love to have you all back on the program again. Before I hand it over to our Chief Policy Officer, who's going to talk about Washington and what is the plan moving forward, please check out our new store. We've got Liberty hats and crypto and Liberty for All t-shirts and all kinds of great things in our new store. It's on our website, so please check it out. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amy Kim, who is our Chief Policy Officer, to talk about what's ahead in Washington. Are we going to get in the game and move forward here? Take it away, Amy. Thanks so much, guys.